Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you very much for joining today's session. And our session today is titled Strengthening Non-Communicable Disease Advocacy in Africa. And we have a seasoned medical professional who will be discussing how to strengthen health policy advocacy in Africa with. And I would like to introduce Dr. Iyore James, and a brief biography of Dr. Iyore James. Dr. James is a general and robotic surgeon. She is a fellow of the American College of Surgeons, certified in kidney and pancreas transplantation by the American Society of Transplant Surgeons. Dr. Iyore is a passionate advocate for good governance and access to healthcare. She is the president of the Nigerian Physicians Advocacy Group and the co-chair of the Nigerian Diaspora Political Affairs Committee, NIDPAC. Dr. James, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Gbadamosi, for having me here.
Thank you. And my first question, when I was reading up about you and your work, I read that a few years ago, I think probably 2018, you took a trip to Nigeria where you performed some medical outreach and you met Nigeria's then Minister of Health. Could you briefly tell us what your discussion with the minister was about?
I believe the trip I've had several trips to Nigeria, so providing medical outreach, and then thinking that 2018 was probably when I think this is when I was with my good friend, Dr. Obi Akwana. Dr. Obi Akwana is a transplant urologist at the University of Toledo in Ohio. And, he has a passion for bringing transplant to low resource economies, societies, especially kidney transplant. And so at the time he was building the transplant program at Federal Medical Center Umuahia. So I went there to assist him. And so we didn't really get to interact much, quite frankly. So I don't recall what much we talked about, to be honest with you, because the focus at the time was trying to get this program started. So I don't know that I can really give you a solid answer there.
It's fine. Yeah, and another thing, it's also about the trip. You, like you said, you performed some kidney transplant and other medical services. What would you say stood out to you about Nigeria's health system from that trip, or from the other trips that you've taken to Nigeria on medical outreach?
I think, the healthcare system is still a work in progress. There are a lot of areas for improvement. I think when you practice in a place like the United States, where things are sort of more streamlined and things are organized by processes, and you go to a country like Nigeria where there's not much of that streamlining, clearly, it calls for a lot of improvement. So I think that a big part of, the issue is just in the leadership, where monies are not really invested in the health of the nation. And so because of that, people are not, people want to do the work, but they don't have the resources, and people are capable of doing the work, but they don't have the resources to implement such. The system just doesn't allow for such innovation and such. So, and I think this is where having leaders who understand the value of health as a way of attaining economic growth, as a way of getting economic development, that once we begin to make those two connections, that if you have a healthy population, people are able to innovate. If you have a system where people can implement their ideas, and you have a system of protecting those intellectual property, that you will see a lot more good within the system. So again, it's just a matter of not having the right vision, whether it's from the leaders or from the people who are following, not having the right vision to implement systems that allow innovation and allows protection of intellectual property.
Quite interesting. The place of vision when it comes to health systems. So I would like for you to draw from your experience in the US to answer this question. So if there's one thing that you think Nigeria should adopt from the United States when it comes to having a stronger health advocacy system, what do you think that would be?
So one thing to adopt from the US. I think rule of law would be the biggest thing. Because when people realize that they can't get away with certain things, I think people behave a little bit better. Which goes back to the whole governance issue, right? Which is where you really, I mean, that is the fundamental problem, is if you don't have good governance, if there's no rule of law, then it doesn't matter. People just do whatever. I mean, if you look through history, and even with the United States, where it is right now, things change because there's rule of law, because there are consequences for not following the rules, and no one is above the law. So as a surgeon, if I practice in a negligent manner, there are consequences. You know, I can be sued, I can lose my license, or whatever the other repercussions are. And so, in as much as that is not, you know, I want to do good by my patients, regardless of what, you know, consequences they might be. But there's an added sort of cross-check that, okay, well, I'm not just doing this because I understand this is a good thing to do by a person. You want to make a person well. But I also have to be careful that I'm not negligent, because if I am, then there are consequences about that. This is not the case in Nigeria.
Quite interesting. I wasn't expecting that you mentioned the rule of law as the most important thing to adopt from the US. But that's quite interesting because, you know, you and I were discussing prior, and I was talking about your master's degree in international affairs as well. So does this have anything to do with that? What's the intersection between medical sciences and international affairs, politics, and governance?
So when I chose to do the Masters of Arts in Law and Diplomacy with my medical degree, I was reflecting from my experience growing up in Nigeria, where, you know, I decided to become a doctor growing up in Nigeria because of the things I saw, because I wanted to help people. But then I quickly realized that I could help people, but if there are policies in place that are not favorable to making that help sustainable, then it's a moot point. So that's why I wanted to be a part of, you know, policy, because I think that that's where, if you're going to have long-standing change, that's where it comes from, not just making it, but being able to implement it. So that was sort of what I was thinking. So when I was looking at medical schools, actually, there were a lot of, you know, programs that offer the joint Masters of Public Health, which sort of makes sense. But I was looking specifically for diplomacy, for international relations, for international law, because as we've talked about, you know, the rule of law eventually is what I think keeps a lot of people in check. And so that is why I chose that path, because like we were talking earlier, everything is interconnected. You know, if I'll just give a simple example, vaccinations, right? In the US, before your kid goes to school, you have to show proof of vaccination. That is policy. The policy was put in place. The people have to follow it. And the consequences that you have a lot of communicable diseases that are curtailed because you have, you know, mass, you know, vaccination or immunity. So for me, yeah, that is where I see the interconnectedness, and that is why I chose to do those two together.
That's quite profound, and I guess that's what gave birth to the Nigerian Physicians Advocacy Group. Tell us a bit about the organization. What does the organization do? How is the organization advancing stronger health systems and stronger policies in Nigeria, in Africa, and beyond the shores of Africa as well?
Absolutely. So the Nigerian Physicians Advocacy Group actually was birthed by the Association of Nigerian Physicians in the Americas, AMPA. So the Association of Nigerian AMPA, for short, has been in existence for over 27 years.
Oh,
And the vision of the organization is a healthier Nigeria. And as we ponder, we do advocacy in Nigeria, we do the medical missions, but as we pondered about our vision and what we're really achieving in Nigeria, it became very clear that the advocacy needed to be boosted a little bit. That we needed to really engage the leaders to understand the value of investing in health as a way to bring about economic growth. And what we quickly realized was that the issue in Nigeria is really a leadership failure, right? Because it's not that Nigeria doesn't have the resources, whether human or otherwise, but the issue is just being able to sort of put the vision into practice. And so this is where the Nigerian Physicians Advocacy Group came about, where we wanted an organization that could extend beyond the strength of a 501c3 organization in the US. And so this 501c4 was born. And our mission really is to promote good governance by educating politicians, political leaders, the electorate, so Nigerian citizens abroad or in Nigeria, on demanding good governance, really. And so our work is really focused on creating a mindset for leadership change, because again, the whole premise is that the reason we're not really able to have a health in Nigeria at the moment is because of a leadership failure. So what are things that we can do to ensure that the right people get into leadership? No, when I say the right people, I mean the people who really want to invest in the Nigerian person, right? That really wants to invest in the healthcare system that would bring about a healthy Nigerian who now has the capacity to be economically productive. As we've talked about before, there's a strong correlation. If you have a healthy population, mentally wise, physically wise, and if you have a system that promotes innovation, then the rest really just falls into place. And I think that's what a place like the US of A, America, has been able to do, where there's the rule of law, you have systems that you build where innovation is rewarded, and where there are consequences for bad behavior for almost everybody.
quite interesting. Thank you very much for your very thoughtful feedback. And one thing that I've seen, or one thing that I'm hearing from our discussion, is that you place a lot of emphasis on health, not just being on its own, but as a holistic system, health itself, because you talk a lot about health and its relationship with the economy, its relationship with education, its relationship with technology and innovation. And I think that's quite important. And my next question also borders on things that are international. And we've seen that a lot of funding for policy advocacy projects and campaigns in Africa come from multinational and international organizations, especially maybe it's the WHO or some other big nonprofit organizations outside of Nigeria. So what are the pros and cons of this kind of funding system where we have other organizations, multinational organizations coming from outside Nigeria to fund health advocacy in Nigeria? Are there any pros? Are there any cons to this kind of system?
Well, I think the pros are that, so why were this international organization formed? After the World War II, 1945, leaders came together and said, okay, never again. Can we have such a thing? And so the United Nations was born. There were treaties that were written. to, you know, curtail world peace. And this is where sort of the alliances between countries started, right? Where you have rules of engagement in war, where you can't target civilians during war and all that. And so in doing this, but clearly, you know, there are specific countries that drive these international organizations.
Yes.
And if there's one thing I learned at the Fletcher School is that we live in a realist world. You know, people are good, but, you know, people want to do good, but eventually people have interests, right? So if I'm American representing America in this international organization, my focus first is on what benefits America and Americans before anyone else, even in as much as we're trying to sort of be a united front, right? And so that the pros could be, okay, yes, you're collaborating with all this other people. Hopefully you guys can come up with common grounds and common values and common goals. And so you can fund those common values. But the con is that, well, I'm still, my allegiance is still to my own country and people before anyone else. And so that if what I'm doing is not going to benefit my country specifically, then, you know, I'm not going to push for it. And so when we would have mock trials, you know, representing different countries, and this is the things we'll do. Eventually, yes, we want everybody to be on the same page, but at the end of the day, one country still wants to be number one, you know, compared to the rest. So this is where, I mean, as much as it's good to have all this international organizational funding, it's also imperative that the leaders of a particular group of people value the people enough to know that when they're at that negotiating table, they are not making compromises that would affect their own people, but benefit whatever strong, you know, country that might be. So an example, you know, when I was very young, when the structural adjustment program started in Nigeria, and I'm not an expert in this, but, you know, there were some good things that the IMF put there, where, okay, we're helping with development and things like that, but there were some compromises that had to be placed, right?
True.
Where, okay, the Naira had to be devalued, and certain things had to happen. And then before you know it, Nigerians are like, okay, well, we can't afford to buy the things we used to buy before because they're so expensive now. So if you were to ask me, I think the leaders really need to understand that it is a realist world, and in as much as you take favors from people, and I shouldn't probably have used that word favors, in as much as you are part of organizations that want to be united and promote whatever core values or whatever, at the end of the day, you have to be looking at your own internal population and situation to understand that, well, if I make this compromise, right, how is that going to affect my, you know, how is it going to affect my people? And put that above sort of the whatever monetary or personal gains that might be achieved, you know.
Yes.
Because it always looks, the devil is always in the details, right? Like when you're negotiating with people, I mean, it's you have to look at the details and see, okay, how is it going to affect the least common person in my society? And if it's going to be very bad, then you may want to reconsider.
Putting the greater good above parochial and personal interests. That's quite true. And my next question is also around that. Drawing from your experience across the US and Nigeria, if you were told to, or if you were recruited on or appointed as an envoy of the African Union or ECOWAS or something, what advice would you give to world leaders or African leaders, I would say, because we're talking about the African context in this place? What kind of recommendations would you give to African leaders about strengthening health systems and health advocacy and policy systems across Africa? I know you've talked about putting the greater good ahead of any other thing, but what are the other, probably about system change, about collaborations between and among African countries and things like that?
So I think we're at the stage as a continent where there are a lot of African diasporas in Western countries that are doing really well, right? And so that I would tap into that resource, really engaging that diaspora community to say, okay, hey, based on, because these people have lived outside of the African context and have seen how things can work differently. And really just tapping into that base and trying to get ideas. And granted, I mean, yes, there are always personal interests, but I think that there are solid diaspora organizations that are truly interested in giving back to their native countries, because that is what has made them who they are. I think about AMPA. I think a lot of the physicians in AMPA truly want to make a difference in Nigeria above any personal gain. And so tapping into organizations like that and really using the expertise within that organization to help formulate some of their ideologies, some of their policy making, and some of their negotiation tactics with some of these international organizations. Because granted, no matter what, I think international organizations are important just for world peace, for trying to keep people accountable. So that would be my advice, is really tapping into those strong diaspora organizations or network of people that have really shown value in giving back possibly to their home countries.
I'll totally agree with that, with tapping into the diaspora community. And that reminds me of something that I read in the news that happened recently. I think the provost of the University of Ibadan School of Health or something, because the department has been going through some rough patch since ASU is on strike and a lot of things have been falling apart with Nigeria's education system. So the department reached out to their alumni that are outside the country, and one of those people donated $1 million on that Zoom call to the school, to the University of Ibadan School of Health. So I mean that shows how important it is for us as countries, as organizations, to tap into our diaspora community, because like you said, they have a lot of things to offer, even beyond money. And for example, you're part of that diaspora community as well, and you come to Nigeria from time to time for medical outreach, to provide free medical services and advice and things like that. So it's quite interesting. And a lot of people have been talking about this also borders our relationship with international organizations and multilateral bodies. A lot of us have been talking about using data generated by Africans in Africa to drive advocacy, to drive health advocacy. How important do you think this is?
I mean, I think data is very important, and the right data is even more so. For me, whether or not it is driven by local talent or international doesn't really matter, because the figures really don't lie. What can be manipulated is how you interpret the data. Right? So it doesn't matter who gets it, as long as the analysis and interpretation is accurate.
Quite interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much. And so the participants, thank you very much for joining us. We are in discussion with Dr. Iyore James, and in a few minutes, we'll open up the floor for questions. So please start thinking, start putting your thoughts together. If you have any questions, I'll open up the floor very soon so that you can ask those questions to enrich this discussion. And my next question is, what is your vision of a healthy Africa? So when we talk about a healthy Africa, what comes to mind? What comes to your mind?
Just where the rule of law is upheld. I mean, I know it sounds simple, but that is really it. I mean, if you think about places that work, right, that is the fundamental thing is, you think about even the United States, right? How is it that the Black Americans were, civil rights movement? Why was that successful? They used the law. All men are created equal. That was like the basis. And it wasn't just the Black Americans, but there were also some white Americans who were like, yeah, that's right. So join the movement. And that was how it started, So I think for me, that's what it is. I mean, that might be very simplistic, but that is my opinion.
Thank you very much. We know how important the rule of law is. And like you've mentioned, it affects a lot of things, in a country where people know that they are accountable, where leaders know that they are accountable to the people, they will have little to no choice than to work in the favor of the people, not in favor
I mean, yeah, they
of their own
think
motives.
twice about it. And if they're gonna do something different, they have to be they have to know how they're gonna manipulate this. I mean, they really have to think hard about it.
Yes. And I mean the consequences are not trivial consequences when they are caught. So
right.
Yeah. And now to our participants, if anyone has any question, please, you can.
Actually, I just wanted to mention, so our participants here actually, so Dr. Susan Iyore is the president-elect of MPAG.
Nice.
So I'm sure if she can make some comments, that would be great. And then we have one of our board members, Dr. Ifeoma Thompson.
Interesting.
And one of our longtime high supporters, Dr. Tabo Ekwonu. So these are the people that I can see. Dr. Owimana, I'm not sure who that is. But so these are sort of strong believers of the mission of MPAG. So
interesting.
It'll be very nice to hear what they have to say as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Tagbo, Dr. Susan, and Dr. Ifeoma. Please, if you can come on camera and just say a few words about strengthening health advocacy systems in Nigeria and in Africa, and also to introduce yourselves to us. We'll appreciate that.
I'm not sure I'm decent enough to come on camera.
Thank you all the same.
As Iyore, Dr. James introduced, I'm Ifeoma Thompson. I've been a member of NIPAG, believing that there will be a solution to Nigerians' problem. And I strongly concur with the fact that if we do have rule of law and good governance, that things will change. But looking at the Nigerian situation, I can't help but, be wondering if we are ever going to get there, and how we can. The whole populace had been so used to not having rule of law, not having good governance. How we going to get to everybody, people paying attention to being lawful and doing what is right, even when nobody is looking? How are we going to get there is still a dilemma to me, and whether it can actually happen, it's still something. I mean, all of us want that to happen, but I still wonder where we're going right now. Just, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ifeoma. And before I let you go, one very important question that I'd like to ask you as well. What is your vision of a healthy Africa?
Just as Dr. James had said, a healthy Africa is an Africa that, we have people that consider other people. There is rule of law. That people, whether you're educated, non-educated, whether you have the means or you don't have the means, whether you're rich or poor, you have access to health, access to education, access to rights. Your rights are considered, and with your religion, in terms of whether you're Muslim or you're Christian, is irrelevant, and you're just considered, a citizen with rights and privilege that is available for everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thompson. From your response, I see that you believe that fairness and equity is very, very important in Africa's healthy future. Thank you very much for joining us. Now I'll go to Dr. Tagbo Ekwono. Thank you very much, Dr. Tagbo, for joining us. A little bit about yourself and your thoughts about how to strengthen Africa's health advocacy systems.
Well, thank you. I came in a bit late, so I missed quite a few of the aspects of the meeting. But I think the president of AMPAG has kind of clearly communicated the mission of AMPAG. I'm a proud member, and I believe in somebody who's in the diaspora and advocating for anything good about Nigeria, and maybe Africa in general. As a family physician, I think I probably more, have more information about healthcare. But there are lots of needs in Nigeria, and unfortunately, a lot of things are lacking, from things that are very basic to water supply, good roads, simple primary care, and that's what makes a healthy nation, to be able to access basic care. It's not about building big structures and with CAT scans and MRIs and all that stuff. That's for the rich. Those doesn't work well or offer anything if you can't get clean water or vitamins for a child or vaccination for children. It's just going to be a failure. So that's what advocacy is about. It's for the people, starting for the basics, not for catering to the wealthy, but lobbying the government to provide this basic stuff and building from there. That's really what's going to create success, not building tertiary institutions that it doesn't cater for the poor, and they can't afford it anyway. Sure. And Nigerians in the diaspora, you mentioned a donation of $1 million by an alumni of University of Ibadan. This is what we should be doing to be able to gather, the powerful Nigerians in the diaspora, to be able, through AMPAG, and being able to advocate and also put our money, behind that kind of advocacy to help our fellow Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And the common question I've been asking: what's your vision of a healthy Africa?
A healthy Africa is very simple. I think it's just you wherever you are in Nigeria or Africa, you turn the tap on, you get simple, basic drinking water. It sounds crazy, but it's as basic as that. Maternity care, vitamins for children, vaccination for children, decent food, decent employment to put food on the table, providing hope to the youth. There's lots of crime in African countries because the youth have no hope. They go to school, schools are closed by strikes, they graduate from school, there are no jobs. It's really devastating for them. Mental health, all that stuff needs to be put in place. That's really where it starts from. Again, just to emphasize, I'm not a big fan of building big structures and importing, big CAT scans and MRIs and all those state-of-the-art hospitals. I'm an advocate of primary care, and that's where everything starts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. So it's all about the people, putting the people first. Thank you very much. Now I'll move to Dr. Susan. Hello, Dr. Susan. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. So a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your thoughts about how to strengthen health advocacy across Africa.
So thank you again. My name is Dr. Susan. I'm an ear, nose, and throat here in Arizona, and I'm also a part of the Nigerian Physicians Advocacy Group, which you heard Dr. Iyore speak about very eloquently. And really our mission became, well, the reason why we are so passionate about the Nigerian Physician Advocacy Group and its mission is because we have, as a large organization, engaged in medical philanthropy for a long time. But it became quite clear that medical philanthropy is not just enough. There's so much to healthcare, infrastructure, security, different things that need to be in place in order for healthcare to truly thrive. Providing access to healthcare, if people can't afford it, how do we fix that? Even having something such as clean water to local facilities. So it became very clear to us that if we really wanted to see health improve, we needed to be a part of a larger conversation where we're not just looking at health itself, but the infrastructure around health, safety, security, water, cleanliness, hygiene, so many different things. I think to your question about how we can really promote healthcare in Africa, one of the things that I think is important, which we see here in the US and in other, quote, developed countries, is public to private partnerships. I do believe that there are so many people who are equipped and ready to engage with African countries in order to help advance healthcare. I know, our organization has engaged in talks about public and private partnerships. Our parent organization has, and even us individually in different avenues. And if that were to be made easier, I think that would go a long way in really allowing Africa to catch up to a lot of other nations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan. That's quite interesting and insightful. And so the common question I've been asking, that I'll ask to you as well, what's your vision of a healthy Africa?
Oh, and sorry for the background noise. It's now they choose to cut the grass. But my vision of a healthier Africa is one that is secure and self-sustaining. There's insecurity issues in many countries in Africa. Nigeria is included. And a lot of times we see our young people leave for that alone. And self-sustaining, you should be able, as an African citizen, to remain in your country and still achieve the, quote, American dream. It's not just a dream that's unique to America. Everybody wants to be able to rise out of poverty and into success. And you shouldn't have to leave your country to be able to do that. So I believe that if we can bring Africa to a point where its youth feel that they can stay within the country and still achieve the dream, the success that they want, then that is a healthier Africa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan, for joining us this morning. And now I would like to ask Mr. Aimable Uwimana. He's part of Engage Africa Foundation. So I'd like to, Aimable, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm glad to hear from these great minds on this topic.
You have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'll first appreciate this conversation because it brought some of the excitement to me with what we're trying to do as putting our efforts together, experience. Maybe one of the things with the common question you have been asking, that's what maybe I want to highlight from actually the response that have been provided. I feel like if I can put it together with each and everyone came to talk about, it's all about working on the social determinants of health. If we are having our youth or even children educated, they are secure, they are living well, our facilities have electricity, have those basic determinants of health like electricity, like security, they're operating in a safe space. So it is now that now we are achieving the healthier Africa we want. Like now, I feel like I'm from Rwanda. I did not talk about where I'm come from. I feel like now I'm challenged to think if I'm not taking for granted the security we have back home here in Rwanda, because well, the facilities are landing well. We don't have issues with some of the process being destabilized by lack of security. So treasuring that is now something that I feel like, well, I have to appreciate the government, but also now as an African who is staying on the continent, put that effort to leverage such action on maximizing the strong state of the social determinants of health to make sure that we have here Africa. That's what I can add from all these insightful comments or discussion we had for almost an hour.
Thank you very much, Aimable. And like the discussion has opened your eyes to a lot of other perspectives. I believe it has done the same for me and for everyone on this call as well. And Dr. Iyore James, before we call it a day, would like to know, where can we find you online if we want to follow your work or learn more about what you do?
Thank you. So yes, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, or Facebook. And I'll have to look at our handles, but you can also follow us on our website, www.npagroup.org. That's www.npagroup.org. And I believe our Twitter handle is @ImpactOfficial. And I think it's the same name as our Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Iyore James. We asked for one expert. We got 4 experts. So we really appreciate that. This discussion has been very enriching, and I've learned a lot about health advocacy and health policy and healthcare in Africa. And so I really can't thank you enough for joining us this morning. And thank you to Dr. Tagbo, to Dr. Susan, Dr. Ifoma, and to Aimable as well. And we hope that Engage Africa Foundation and NPAG will be able to work together in the future, because we have the sort of same vision that you have, which is all about putting the people first when it comes to healthcare in Africa, advocating for strong healthcare systems. So once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Gbadamosi. Have a great day.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.